Welcome guys to another episode of The Extra Mile. My name is Alex and this guy is Paul. Welcome to the final verdict about the Odyssey Plus versus Oculus Rift. In this episode we will go into a detailed comparison that focuses on the issues that are important to me mostly, which is screen, fitment, comfort while wearing it, all that kind of stuff. So let's dive right into it and start with the boring stuff. I do have my handy kitchen scale here, which has seen better times clearly, but it should work just fine. Let's put the Odyssey Plus on the scale and I'm reading 560 grams of weight. That is without the cable, just this little part of the cable here. And we have the Rift, which is 477. So the Odyssey is a little bit heavier than the Rift. You can feel that immediately. It's not a super dramatic increase in weight, but it is noticeable, I would say. But since the weight is distributed more evenly over your head, it's not really a big deal. Which brings us to our next point, which is a little bit more interesting, I would say. Comfort. Now this is a big one. Let me put on the Rift for you and demonstrate what was the biggest negative for me personally as a user with glasses about the Rift. Now, putting on the Rift was a procedure that involved pulling the Rift over your glasses. Sometimes the glasses get stuck like this. Let me try this again. Pulling them over the glasses, and then you fit them, and then you kind of put them into place, and then you can start to play. Not a super big deal, but as you can see, again, the glasses get stuck in there a little bit. It's a little bit tight for when you're wearing glasses. Other than that, the comfort is pretty good. One thing that always bothered me with the Rift when I was playing in longer sessions is that it gets really, really warm in there, and you start to sweat. And that can get pretty annoying after a while. But other than that, I never really had big issues with the Rift in terms of comfort, apart from it being a little bit too narrow to fit my glasses under there comfortably. But once I was in there, once the glasses were in there, I could play for an hour or two without any issues, except for the heat issue. Now let's get to the Odyssey and check out the same procedure of putting the Odyssey on. And it's so simple. That's all I have to do. I just put it on my head and I'm done. And that is a huge plus in my book, that I can comfortably put it on and off my head without having to fiddle with it too much, without taking off my glasses because they get caught in the headset foam or anything like that. It's just a super comfortable procedure, super easy. So if you are wearing glasses and you're worried about fitting the glasses in either one of the headsets, the Odyssey is definitely the winner in that regard. When it comes to comfort, a lot of people have said that this part of the headset, that foam here that sits on top of your head here, that can get a little bit uncomfortable after you play for a while, and I agree. There's definitely room for improvement there. However, I personally like to put it a little bit higher on my head so more weight rests on the back of my head here, and then to me personally it's perfectly fine. There is a little bit of light leak here at the sides, so I think this could be improved, but overall I've heard so many stories about comfort of the Odyssey, and now that I've been using it for about a week or two, overall I would say it's more comfortable than the Rift for me personally. But a lot of that is due to the fact that I can just put it on my head and off my head so much easier than I could do with the Rift. But yeah, enough about comfort. Let's go to something that's actually quite interesting, I would say. Alright, FOV. This is a big one, and this was really surprising to me. And not as noticeable for some reason when I went from the Rift to the Odyssey, but when I went back down, so to speak, to the Rift to test this today, it was immediately noticeable. So let me show you the edges of my vision in the Odyssey first. That is the blue square that you can see right now. The way that I did this is that I just centered myself in Project Cars 2 in the correct driving position and focused on the edges of my vision and where it ends. And this is exactly what you can see here on the screen. The blue square outlines the edges of my vision. Pretty simple. And here we have the Rift, and this actually blew my mind. When I went back down to the Rift, it was immediately noticeable that the FOV was much smaller, and that I couldn't even see the right A pillar here, for example. And yeah, what kind of blew my mind is that it did not feel as impressive when I went up to the Odyssey for the first time. I guess because maybe the lack of screen door effect or the added clarity of the display were more impressive, and I focused more on that. But when I went back down to the Rift to test this today, it was immediately noticeable. Really interesting, really impressive, and quite a strong point in favor for the Odyssey. And now let's go to something that is actually pretty damn cool. The display. A lot of people have been talking about the display and the anti-screen door effect, and for some it introduces a little bit more blurriness to the screen that I would like to see. And I can see their point. It does take a little while to set up the Odyssey just right though, and I will do a dedicated episode about that, how to get the most visual quality out of your headset, what settings to use and so on. But I gotta say, the visual improvement, just as I said in my first impressions video that I did over the Rift, it's a massive step. You really do not have any screen door effect anymore. It is sharper than the original Rift is. I can see some Vive Pro users have said that the Odyssey Plus is not quite as sharp than the Vive Pro seems to be, which might be due to the anti-screen door technology, and I can totally see that being correct. But when you're coming from an original Vive, the sharpness and clarity of the image is still a noticeable improvement. On top of that, you get a brighter display with more vibrant colors, and I think it's just, yeah, I wanted a big noticeable step up from the Rift, and that's exactly what I got, and that's awesome. So now let's move over to tracking. As you all probably know, with the Rift you need cameras to track the headset in 3D space, and that works really well most of the times. Sometimes I had issues with the tracking in the Rift that it suddenly jumped up half a meter or so, or jumped to the side, and then I had to recalibrate the view. That didn't happen every time I used it, but it happened, I would say, at least 2 or 3 times a week, and I have used my Rift almost on a daily basis. So that could be a little bit annoying. Sometimes it happened during a race, for example. You're just driving along, focusing on the track, and then suddenly your view jumps up and you have to recalibrate, fumble for the keyboard. So that was a little bit annoying. But other than that, the tracking worked reasonably well most of the times. And surprise, surprise, I actually prefer the inside-out tracking of the Odyssey Plus. It just does seem to work a little bit better, and I didn't have any issues that it suddenly lost tracking or that it suddenly jumped and I had to recalibrate or reset my view. I didn't experience that once. It just works really well. I gotta say, I'm really surprised. This is the first headset with inside-out tracking that I've used, and I don't think that I would want to go back to external tracking anytime soon, because I just don't see the point. What I especially like about this solution here in the Odyssey Plus is that you can use all the space that you have and walk around. You don't need to worry about Can the tracking camera see me? Am I getting out of bounds? It just always works, and that's really awesome. Whenever I got close to the edge of my tracked space here with a Rift, you can tell in the headset that suddenly the movements of the headset got a little bit jerky, and you could just tell. With the Odyssey Plus, there's none of that. You just have tracking everywhere all the time, and it's a really great feature to have. Oh, but now I want to talk about something that is actually not so great. So, Windows Mixed Reality's version of asynchronous time warp just doesn't work as well as it does in the Rift. In the Rift, when you get below 90 frames per second, the game automatically switches to 45 frames per second and kind of calculates the missing frame on its own. I don't really understand or know the details about how it works, but what I do know is that even when you have a relatively low frame rate in a game, it appears still very fluid and playable in the Rift. You really have to get to a very low frame rate to notice anything here in this headset, and that is actually very, very good. That's really great. In the Windows Mixed Reality version, you definitely notice it when you get below 90 frames per second. In fact, all the games that I've played with the Odyssey, I make sure that I stay at 90 frames per second now, because when you get below that, you get noticeable stuttering. That's not always there, but often enough that it really impacts your gaming experience. At least in my case, that was really noticeable. So you do need a powerful PC to run this. It does need a little bit more performance than the Rift, obviously, to reach 90 frames per second, because we do have a higher resolution here. It's not a super big difference, but it is a noticeable difference that you need a little bit more performance. So that is one thing that I noticed that is not ideal yet. I think that could be improved, and I think it will be improved in the future. But as it is right now, by Paul, talking too much for you. Yeah, it's noticeable when Windows version of asynchronous time warp kicks in. It's just a lot of stuttering, and it's not really that great. Even though this is not that important to me, controllers is a big issue when you play in VR. The biggest difference is when you have the touch controllers in your hand. You can see that here. It basically feels like having a hand in VR. When you grip something with a controller in your hand, it feels like you're picking it up with your actual hand, just because they fit so nicely in your hand. You basically forget that you're wearing them after a while. The difference here with the controller of the Odyssey is you feel like you're having, well, an object in your hand with which you pick up stuff in the world. So it's not like using your hands, it's like holding an object with which you can pick things up. I don't know if that comes across what I mean, but I think you get it. And that is the big difference. You don't actually have your hands anymore in VR, you're holding something in VR that you interact with. And it's just overall not even close to the experience that you get with the touch controllers. That being said, you can use it. The tracking is perfectly fine as long as you don't move your hand behind your back or anything. And it works reasonably well. It's just not as nice to use as the touch controllers were. But speaking of which, let's actually weigh the controllers. I have batteries in both controllers, by the way, touch and the Odyssey one. The Odyssey one weighs 191 grams and the touch controller 158. So I actually thought the weight difference would be larger, but maybe it just feels larger because of how the controller is sitting in your hand. Hard to say, but if you play a lot of VR games standing up, sitting down, and non-cockpit VR games where you need your hands in VR, the touch controller is definitely the way to go. I think I've touched upon everything that was important to me. Final verdict is, if you're looking for a substantial visual upgrade over the original Oculus Rift, the Odyssey is definitely a great product to choose. I am very happy with it. I noticed that I spent a lot more time in VR since I've gotten it. I've had the original Oculus since launch, and it has been quite a while, and it has seen at least 1,000 hours of use, I would say. And my interest and passion for virtual reality has been revived, so to speak, with the Odyssey Plus. It's a noticeable upgrade, and I'm very happy that I made the purchase. I'm still looking forward to a true Rift 2 whenever that will come to market, but until then I have something that will hold me above water. And yeah, I'm really happy with it. I hope that some things on the software side can still be improved, like for example that Windows version of asynchronous TIMEWARP that does not work that well. But other than that, I'm really happy with it. If you're in the market for a headset right now and you're looking for the best visual quality and you don't want to spend Pimax 5K money, then I would highly recommend the Odyssey. Anyway, this is it, guys. More videos with the Odyssey Plus are on their way, and I hope you enjoyed this comparison. I will do a dedicated video about getting the best performance out of this headset and what settings to use. I think that's very important. And until then, I hope you have a great day, and I see you in the next episode, guys. Bye bye.